Today we're going to talk about word bubbles. Speak about word bubbles. It's kind of important to have that not be a last thought when you're drawing, unless you can change your drawing on its layers easily. Usually when you're making a comic, you want to purposely leave room for the words in there while you're laying out your page. You'll see that with some comics and things, authors may not even bother to draw figures. It might just be like an entire panel of words, especially if it's wordy. But mostly you don't want to come in with a finished drawing like I have here and start adding in the words right here, because it's always going to be, you are going to want to, when you're doing word bubbles, keep in mind that when you're putting in dialogue, if you're working around an already finished drawing, it's going to kind of come out a little tight and maybe hard for your reader to read. And it's important that your reader is able to catch everything that's being said, which you'll notice that I'm writing in all caps, and that's not just because the person is angry. It's because it's easiest for your reader to read when it's in all caps. Just to give an example of giving space for the figure, usually it's a good idea to think about breathing room up above them, that they can come in and speak from there. I can go in and write unforgivable right now. And that's a little bit more legible, but unfortunately in this case I did not give myself enough space, because I should have just gone and done that. Now, Clip Art Studio actually has word bubble tools that we could use, but I'm just going to use writing out for right now because I feel like that's going to be faster. Now, you'll notice that that's much more easier to read, although in this case, it's less intense. So if I wanted to, I could add more intensity by altering the picture again, but instead of changing the size of the bubble, I'm changing the size of my figure. So you can see the expression a little bit more, which is all part of the things for your reader to understand what's going on. Because your reader will have clues from the word bubble, clues from the character's expression, what they're saying, and their whole body language as to what's going on. So the text is only a small part of telling your story. You'll notice when I did the little flag, I made the bubble first and then added the flag as a kind of afterthought. That's mostly just because it makes it a little neater when I'm drawing it out. But there are more things one can do to make what little coyote here is saying more, you can say it's a random statement. You know, there isn't any vitriol or ice or anything behind her words. It's just how it appears. If I wanted to make it seem like she was shouting it, which it does kind of look like it's shouting right now, I'll admit, but if everything that you're writing is all in caps, then it's going to come across as normal dialogue. So what the person is speaking is not any less or more intense than how it was in the past. So I'm just slightly making this bubble here bigger. If all of your text is lowercase in this case, if you wanted to make what they're saying more intense, you would make it even bigger in the word bubble. It's more like a shout. And if you wanted to make it even more like a shout, there's a special bubble in Clip Studio Paint called a flash, which there's multiple ways of having that come across. Whoops, I'm going to want to reverse those. A flash kind of comes off like that with a jagged edge. But in fact, I think instead for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and do a kind of more jagged line. When the word bubble isn't entirely even and straight, that adds even more intensity to what your character is saying, which, as you can see, I started working around my character again, which I don't want to do. So I'm going to scoosh them down once again and go back to the word bubble here, come back around. Make sure some of that comes down to the character, just so the reader knows who's speaking. And then I'm just going to borrow this text again, instead of having to rewrite it out again, because it takes a long time. Copy, paste, and transform. So you see what the person is saying right there is already coming across as more intense, although because I'm handwriting it, it's a little less legible for what your reader can read, which is why it's a good idea to alternatively use word bubbles. I'm going to switch back to the Eclipse balloon and then back into here. So with Clip Studio Paint, it's often set up on preset settings that you can see off to the left over here. I typically do my fonts in Verdanda. If I kept it that small, it might come across that my character is actually whispering it. In fact, I can even change the size of the balloon to bring it down. No, she's looking straight at the viewer, so it doesn't really come across as that she's whispering. Like for expression, if I were having her whisper that, I might have her looking away from the camera and have a little bit of more of a subdued or maybe even pouty expression. But we're just viewing what the word bubble has for this particular practice. So I'm going to make a duplicate of that. And then I'm going to get rid of this little flag here. Because because there's a tool really here that I like a lot, which is the pen balloon. So like if a person was unsteady or uncertain, the little word balloon might be more jagged in that way. Alternatively, if it's more jagged, it can kind of seem like it's more unstable or sharper, what she's saying. In fact, you can even come in with the word balloon and make it even bigger. And just these little touches and styles gives a little bit of personality to what she's saying, right? And that's because it's jolted so close together, it's a little harder to read. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to make it all bigger, especially since what she's saying is a very big thing to say. What is unforgivable, you might ask? It's mispronouncing what she is. Or at least that's the way it was in the story, because Little Coyote is kind of crazy. And you can make her words even more enunciated by bolding them, which makes it easier for the reader to read, and you can even italicize, which makes it seem like the person is being much more louder in their feelings. I could make it all bigger before. Yeah, there it is. Of course, this little part down here is less obvious that it's pointing towards her now, so I'm going to fix that. You'll notice there's all those little balloons, which acted kind of like an individual line markers so that you can adjust if you wanted to make it straighter, give it a very fiery look. If you wanted to make it even more, and you'll notice I center the words here. It gives it a visually pleasant appearance if it's centered, and also make sure that your reader can read what you've written. With the balloon tail tool, if you want to make that jagged line even more sharper, you can come in and kind of fake it almost with multiple balloon tails. Just kind of like this. It doesn't work as well though, honestly. But yes, this gives it a more prickly look, right? It's like she's speaking it normally, but there's an edge to it, which is probably more appropriate for this particular scenario. And you can make your word balloon line wider too by adjusting the width of the tail in the directions. So like I could do that and go over it, and it makes it more noticeable. Another thing that might be good to think about is the actual text that you're using for dialogue, the text font. Like I just went by my standby in Vedanta. You can kind of personalize your handwriting based off it, and obviously you can download more different fonts and stuff, but I highly recommend using fonts that make it more legible to your readers. Like if I choose this one in particular, if you didn't know that I had written out Unforgivable, that's like legible to what your reader is, and you don't want to err from their understanding of what you're trying to come across. Like you have this Unforgivable in AR Destinine, which makes it look a little bit more sharper and robotic. I might make it a little bigger. You don't want your text to be too unlegible, so you want to give it all you can possibly do to make it legible for you. Alternatively, play around until you see something that comes across as your character, but make sure that it's not unlegible to read. Card Gothic is okay, but the letters are kind of tight together. If you wanted to look more robotic, you might give it a stencil-y look. Comic Sans is something you might consider for a more humorous look, and is also reasonable, but it just it looks a little unprofessional, I guess. Not that you need your comics done professional, especially if you're doing it as a hobby thing, but it's just something to think about. Next, want to think about the directions of the arrows when you're making them. Like for instance, if you have your balloon tail pointing away from the screen, it kind of gives the audience a clue that the last person that was speaking, the last person from the previous panel that was speaking is the person that this is pointing towards. Now, alternatively, if you have it facing away, it might be somebody that's coming up in the next panel. Alternatively, you can also have it be somebody who was speaking previously if you have the line coming inwardly. Because it's facing away from the character, it must be coming from a different character and not the one that it was originally speaking. You can come in, and I'm just going to change the font size to be way bigger than 18, since I'm using a very big thing. No, 400 is not going to do it. Let's just go back to 40. Yeah, that's more reasonable. And then go, this sword is mine. When you're laying out your words, it's also kind of important to think about, especially multiple dialogue balloons, because you want to be thinking about the order of which your reader is reading your dialogue balloons. Now, most people who read books from left to right are going to want to read balloons that are more so on the left side first, and then they will come down naturally and read things on the right. A good example of me trying to put in a bunch of different comics and having the space to read it. Like, I originally, when I drew this, drew Daisy much bigger in this panel line, but I had to shrink her down because I wanted to include, like, way more of the chant from that Lena Inverse said that I did actually, but I realized that there was much more that I needed to say previously, which I definitely reworded and rewrote a bunch of lines and summarized as much as I could to fit in the page, but you still don't get to see a lot of the stuff that I did in the background as a result of my poor planning. Let me actually just open up the original file so you can kind of see the backgrounds that I made with that. There is a ton of dialogue here, as you can see. When I take away the dialogue here, a lot of background kind of got hidden by that, and you see this really cool effect that I had with the magic comic being activated. I was kind of stubborn about sticking to my vertical landscape here. You kind of missed out a lot of the background that I made, so I was wasting a whole bunch of time putting for a background that you didn't really get to see, but I feel like you still kind of got the presence of it when I was making it. To go on to what I was saying, you'll notice that I kind of add visual clues about where the writer should be going next, and I can't say that I did the best job here. Comic bottles are connected, so I made it seem like that was where you're supposed to lead, and then you see this little tag from here. So you kind of get the impression, and I hope that it came across as you're supposed to read it like this, and if I had stuck these two comic panels any closer together, you might have wanted to read this to this, which is not what I wanted the reader to read. The way this was supposed to be read was like this, and you'll see that I'm kind of like moving my bubbles back and forth, which I still had a lot of trouble fitting things in. In this case, you'll notice that instead of doing another diagonal and putting the dragon slave on this side, it definitely feels like it would have flowed better, but if I had put that last panel there, English style readers probably would have not felt right in their reading of it. If this was a Japanese manga, everything would be reversed, but it is not. And I probably could have done this even better by lifting that up a little higher, because the size of this panel right here kind of makes you want to look at this first, but you're still getting the idea to look at that first, just from the fact that it comes first in one's flow of the reading going left to right. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, that last position of the dragon slave there meant that nothing had to cross over on this side for the reader to read, which would have involved me having this thing maybe on crossing over Daisy's face even. I wanted Daisy too to be centered because I wanted to show off all the magic powers that were going around her. Because of the size of the comic, I couldn't do that as well. I am not yet a professional, so this is a learning process for even me. Other things I wanted to come across is you have to kind of keep in mind the background when you're making comics. Like I was showing you before, you have a super detailed background, and if you don't space enough, you won't really see it if you mislay your word bubbles. And I want to point out that some cases, people will change the opacity of the word bubble so you could see the background beneath it. But there's a danger in that your words will be less visible to your reader. I've been seeing a lot of stories on webtoons where people will like do super dark background, all edgy and whatnot with a pattern in the background. But yeah, they'll make it super edgy and detailed at the background, and then they'll come in with the word balloons and they'll make it transparent so you can see the background underneath to give it an air. And in some cases, authors can do that really well, but in other cases, you have to suddenly start zooming in really close to the page to read it, which I highly recommend not doing that, because the harder it is for your reader to read the word balloon, the less likely they're going to keep reading it. In this case, someone might take the text on there, and so you can come in with a regular Eclipse tool, and you'll notice if I go in and I write unforgivable in red, it can make it a little harder for the reader to read it. So what you could do alternatively is duplicate the layer and change the text to white, and then up the size of it slightly so the text kind of outlines itself. And in some cases, that can make it a little bit more legible over the balloon. So it looks like it's a little bit of an outline. And that's another way you can make your text more legible. But I feel like avoiding eye strain in all cases is a good idea. So making sure that it's readable as you pull away from a distance, especially with everybody spending the majority of their life on a phone. You want to be able to make sure that somebody could shrink it down and read it on the size of on a phone screen. So trying to make the text as big as you can and more obvious is usually the goal that I go for. I guess I can point out in this particular word balloon that you can still kind of tell the little coyote is talking even without the balloon tag, because she's the only one that's on the screen. But it could still be somebody that was on the prior panel that was speaking. So those are both things to keep in mind. For comics, there's actually a tool that you can buy that specifically is good for writing out your comics, because it can make spaced lines like this. Something that professional letterists do in traditional comics. I'm just going to do an example here, though. On a computer, though, as you can see, you can just draw the lines that you need and then later get rid of them when you don't need them. You want to keep in mind of the letters being about the same width and height, so they're as legible as you can. Read for your readers. I am not a professional letterer, so my handwriting is probably not clean. But you'll notice I'm kind of using this center line here to kind of make sure that the things are evenly spaced. And often professional letterers will think about letters being about the same width and height from each other, but I'm just kind of rushing it, so I know this isn't neat at all. One thing I forgot is you can also totally copy and paste letters and drag them if you've done the same letter twice, which I don't think that I have in this particular case, except for that E. Like, professional comic letterers will actually take the time to make sure that their letters are looking exactly the same, so it can almost seem like that that they're using a font on a computer. But in traditional comics, they are most commonly not. Computers made things a lot more easily from nowadays, I'll tell you that. I'm just kind of coming back in and fixing the spacing so it isn't so awkward. You'll see that writing it out like this is a little tedious, and it just adds more work in most cases, so that's why I tend to just use text. And I'm gonna steal the E again, so I don't have to draw it again. But having the lines there make it at least a very similarly shaped for where you're placing the words. Oh, I could have copied that R at the same time. Silly me. And I don't think I have a D pencil. And then do this jacked up S. Now, I don't even have space for that last word, mine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that in, because text is often centered like that when it's filled inside a word balloon. And then I'll just go down on my line layer again. Actually, I'm going to bring everything up slightly. Use that to bring in another layer of text. And then in mine. Boy. Little Coyote is always about declaring things first. I half tempted to write the word food in there instead of sword, because honestly she's more food motivated than sword. Oh, I could have copied an E and an exclamation point, but I felt like that. This is all very big for a word bubble, so I'm collecting the whole thing and shrinking it down slightly, and then just gonna come in really quickly and doodle something in there, and then get rid of the lines. And you kind of get the idea that you get a more straight out text there. And I can even go as far as to go as doing earlier, make it all pointy. I think that font is too small. I mean, it's not round, but you can kind of get the impression of the words there. Alternatively, again, I could split the text up a little. Now, because I wrote those guidelines here, I can separate this out pretty easily. And then I can make this last word even bigger to enunciate what she's saying. course, once again, characters getting in the way of the words again. I think in this case I'm going to shrink down the words a little bit. And then do a polygon tool with just a line. And you'll notice without the ellipse tool kind of automatically updating the bubbles, I have to kind of come in and delete the lines when I'm doing it this way. Still somewhat legible, although I don't like how the ear is intercepting the word bubble there, so I'll just shrink that down slightly. And then I can just leave it like it is, but I'm going to move that down slightly just because it doesn't feel right unless it's very close to what you're saying. Well, let me think if I can think of two characters talking to each other. Yeah, you can see here I made his declaration of who he is. Very bold and loud here, and everything is coming down, so the reader is knowing what comes first. And once again, I probably could have made this higher up to further enunciate that part comes first and bring that down a little bit, because I give myself plenty of space here. Now, I wanted her to be the next person speaking, and I think in this particular case, it doesn't quite matter when you read this last line here, but I still think it comes across as the intention being here, here, to here. But yeah, once again, you notice that the text is going left or right, just so the reader knows which direction you're wanting to read this line here. You'll see in this case here, I made Tara's voice seem sweet by giving her the kind of fluffy cloud look here. And also, she was kind of, her comic thing overlapping his was kind of a good way of representing that she interrupted him. Like, you can kind of see right here that I did indicate that a sentence was stopping by that dash, and then I made much smaller bubbles here to kind of give an idea of the dialogue starting and stopping more. Alright, is there anything else I can show you? One thing I kind of regret about the background I made for Naturally Unique's shop here is that kind of confetti background here is so bright that it kind of makes the scene very, very busy. I think if I were to come in and do it again, I would probably reduce the opacity for it so you could better read the dialogue for it. Made me put a shadow over it so that the signs for the shoes and the hats come across more so that they're not a line of dialogue. You can tell here I didn't do spacing very well because I gathered all of and used dialogue together here. Obviously, it was important for me to show off Verdigree's costume because I was really proud of that Cat Noir one. But the way I laid it out was you still could read everything, but it just feels like I should have risen things up a little bit. Like you can almost not see Verdigree's dialogue up here. I might have risen this dialogue up a little bit, but then it would have intersected his wing even more. I don't know, sometimes I see mistakes when I look at my old work, but I can't help but to enjoy it too. I guess I enjoyed the writing process part of it and characters' expressions. Like I can definitely bit more of a background into these things. I'm not sure if there's much more that I can share dialogue wise. I think I pretty much covered most of what I wanted to say, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up again. I hope you have a delightfully awkward day.